Hey MMS, so today we're going to be learning from week 2, lesson 4. This is the last lesson before our review and before our test. So let's just backtrack a little bit. In lesson 2 and in lesson 1, we were really just learning about how to compare decimals and the steps to get there. So in week 2, we're really building towards lesson 4, where we're going to be comparing and ordering decimals. So we're going to compare some decimals and put them in order from least to greatest. In lesson 1, we learned about decimals that are greater than or less than 1 and practice writing, if they gave us a word sentence, writing this as a decimal number. Okay. In lesson 2, we practiced using the place value and converting fractions into decimals using the place value chart. Okay, so this was one strategy. So we were converting from a fraction to a decimal. Someone asked me earlier, what does converting mean? Well, converting means that we're just going to change this fraction to look like a decimal. Okay. And then in lesson 3, we were doing the same thing. We were still converting fractions into decimals, but we were using a calculator to do it. So remember, if you have a fraction like 2/5, just put 2 divided by 5 in your calculator. So numerator divided by denominator, and you'll get your decimal. We also talked about repeating and terminating decimals, but we were practicing going from a fraction to a decimal. In lesson 4, we're going to use those ideas of converting from a fraction to a decimal or converting from a decimal to a fraction. And we're going to use those ideas to compare and order fractions and decimals. Okay. So here we see in the key idea that we are given either fractions, which we see like 1/2, 3/4, 4/5, or we're given as decimal 0.55, 0.6. And given this set of numbers, we need to order them. Okay, so let's read the directions at the top. Converting decimals to fractions or fractions to decimals may help when comparing decimals and fractions. So the reason we're doing lessons 2 and 3 is because it's going to help us with this lesson to compare decimals and fractions. So we need to order the following numbers from least to greatest. So whenever ordering, we're going to put least on one side and greatest on the other side. And you can always write this on your paper so that you remind yourself, okay, I need to order from least to greatest. So the smallest numbers are going to go over here and the biggest numbers are going to go more towards the right side. We are given a bunch of different numbers, as I said, but if we convert everything to fractions with a common denominator of 100, we're going to be able to easily compare them, right? I can more easily compare all these fractions that have a denominator of 100 rather than trying to compare these fractions and decimals, because when they are in the same denominator, I can tell right away that like 50 is smaller than 55 or 80 is larger than 75. But I might not be able to see that right away from looking at 4/5 and 3/4. Okay, so that's why we're going to change how they look. We're going to come up with equivalent fractions so we can compare them. Or we're going to turn the decimals into a fraction. So half. Well, half, if you put it in your calculator, 1 divided by 2, that's just 0.5. And, 0.50. And if you put this in the place value chart, remember whatever number we end with, the 0, that's the place that we look at in the place value chart. So this 0 is in the 100 spot. And we know that we want a denominator of 100. So this would be 50 hundredths. The way that we say it is the way we write it. So I would say this decimal 0.50, I would say this as 50 hundredths. And so that's how I write it. 50 over 100, 50 hundredths. Again, the way that I say this decimal is the way I'm going to write it. So 0.55, I would say this as 55 hundredths. This second 5 right here ends in the hundredth spot. So that's why I say 55 hundredths. So I write it as 55 hundredths, and I put this over here so I can compare them later. Now you have to try to turn this fraction into a decimal. Remember, all you need to do is divide numerator divided by denominator. So that's going to be 3 divided by 4. In your calculator, it'll give you an answer of 0.75. Again, the way that you say it is the way you're going to write it. So 75 hundredths. 5 ends in the hundredth spot. Okay, 0.6. The 6 is in the tenth spot. So you are going to write this as 6 tenths. 6 tenths. Now, to go from 10 to 100, all you need to do is multiply the denominator by 10. And whatever we do to the bottom, we're also going to do to the top. So you're going to multiply the top by 10. 6 times 10 is 60. Or if you notice, if we had 6 tenths, if you just add a 0 to the 100, then you just need to add a 0 to the numerator as well. All right, last one. 4 divided by 5. In your calculator, you're going to get 0.8. It might give you 0.8. It might give you 0.80. If it gives you 0.8, remember that 8 is in the 10th spot, which means 8 tenths. And if we just add a 0 to get 100, we also add a 0 here. Okay, that's one strategy. Or multiply the top and bottom by 10. You'll still get that same answer of 80 over 100. All right, so now we have all of the numbers in the same form. They all have a common denominator of 100, so we can easily compare them. So I noticed that 50 over 100 is the smallest number. So you can either put 50 over 100, or you can put its original fraction right here, comma, and then I'm going to put the next smallest number, which looks to be 55 hundredths, comma. Okay, so I did that one and that one. Now I have 3 more, and I need to determine the next smallest number, because remember, we're going from least to greatest. Well, it looks like 60 is the smallest out of 75 and 80. So 60 will go next, over 100, comma. 75 is smaller than 80, 75 hundredths. And then last one is 80 hundredths. So 80 hundredths is the biggest number that we have. And that would be your answer, okay? So in this strategy, let me use a different color. This strategy here, we converted everything to fractions, okay? And we compared. They're showing you a separate strategy for this table. So in this table, they're showing you that you can convert everything to decimals and you'll get the same results. So 1 divided by 2, you're going to get 0.5. And just make sure what they're doing in this column is making sure that they all end in the hundredths place. So that way, instead of just comparing 0.5 with 0.75, notice how 0.75 has 2 decimal places after the decimal place, and 0.5 only has 1 decimal place. So we want to make sure we're adding that second decimal place. So again, we're comparing the same numbers with the same type of decimal places, okay? So we want to make sure that they all have, or they're all up to the hundredths place. Okay, so you're going to fill in the rest of this table. So 0.55. That's already a decimal, right? So you don't need to do anything here. So you can just put 0.55. There's no computation here. It's already in the hundreds place, so you're good. And then 0.6, well, I would add a 0, right, for the hundreds place. If there's nothing here, right, you can always add a 0. All right. So whatever you prefer, whether you want to turn them all to decimals or if you want to turn them all to fractions, you're going to get the same answer here. So 0.50 is the smallest, then 0.55, then 0.60, 0.75, and then 0.80. And I covered it up, but I believe it shows the answer right here. Okay, so that's the lesson for lesson 4. Then you're going to go to the try this section, and make sure you're reading the directions because a lot of times students are getting stuck, but they're not reading the directions. So you're going to convert the following decimals to fractions. Okay, so remember, you're going to see how many place values it has. What what place value does the last number end in? So like for number 1, that 8 is in the hundreds place. So I know that this is going to be 58 hundredths. So I would write this as 58 hundredths. Okay, you're going to do the same with 2, 3, and 4. And then practice for this section is asking you to convert the following fractions to terminating decimals. So it tells you that the decimal is going to terminate. All you need to do is divide the numerator by denominator. So in your calculator, you're going to do 7 divided by 8 and get your answer. Okay, you're going to do that for each of those problems. Convert the following fractions to repeating decimals. This time it tells you that the decimal repeats. Okay, so do the same thing, numerator divided by denominator in your calculator. Make sure you use the repeat bar. Okay, that's where you put a repeat bar over the number or numbers that are repeating, so you don't have to constantly repeat writing them. And then it's asking you to order the following numbers from least to greatest. So they give you these numbers. Make sure to either put them all in decimal form or all in fraction form and order them from least to greatest, just like we did here in the key idea section. And then, of course, do the reflection. And that's lesson 4. Please let Mr. Schmidt or I know if you have any questions.